Welcome to the Agrihood. Carnes Crossroads is a new home community with a farm-to-table lifestyle. Just outside of Charleston, here, community is defined by gathering together and our deep connection to nature.
Learn more at carnescrossroads.com.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Ira Wolfe about the biggest people management mistakes organizations are making and the impending perfect labor storm. Ira Wolfe, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here, John.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. We are going to be exploring the perfect labor storm and get it within this pandemic context and everyone going virtual. Organizations have been trying to deal with all sorts of challenging issues related to people management, staffing, hiring. We're going to be talking about what employers should be expecting as they ramp up hiring and really get into this idea of the perfect labor storm that's coming our way. And I'm excited to have that conversation with you. As we get started, I just wanted to share Ira's bio with everybody. Ira Wolfe is a millennial trapped in a baby boomer body and the world's first chief Googleization officer. He ranks in the top 5 global thought leaders in future of work and HR on Thinkers 360. He's president of Poised for the Future Company and founder of Success Performance Solutions. Ira has presented on the prestigious red carpet of TEDx, stage of Disrupt HR, and is the author of several books, including Recruiting in the Age of Globalization, selected by Book Authority as one of the all-time best HR and recruiting books. He hosts the weekly Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization show, leads Googleization Nation, and is on a personal mission to unlock the secrets of human adaptability, ensuring no one is left behind living in the fastest period of change in history. He recently joined an elite group of global business consultants when he achieved the AQ certified practitioner status. Ira is typically no further than a few clicks away, as he is a frequent contributor to HR and business blogs, including Cornerstone on Demand, Rework, LinkedIn, and Medium, as well as a frequent podcast guest. Ira, it is a real pleasure to have you joining me today. Before we launch into the conversation, anything else that you would like to share with listeners by way of background or personal context?
No, I think you covered it all. Other than I keep chasing you on Thinkers 360. Right?
Well, it's a pleasure to connect with someone with your extensive and thorough and prestigious background, and I always love having these conversations. And I was super intrigued as we were preparing for this episode, and you sent over some materials, and I was thinking about what you had framed in some of your materials as this perfect labor storm, and I think that's a really apt description. So maybe we can start with what you mean by that, and then we can start to dig into some specific elements, in relation to the challenges organizations are facing related to staffing and ramping up hiring.
So the perfect labor storm was something I've come up with actually 21 years ago. So if for those who were around back then, McKinsey had talked about the war on talent, or the talent war. They were anticipating that there would be a shortage of labor. And then just a few years later, we had the dot-com boom in 1999. And there were literally more jobs being created than there were people to fill them. That was a real crisis. It wasn't just this job shortage. It wasn't a distribution. It was just a shortage of people. Economy was booming. And I was trying, people explained it similar to what they're doing now. The reason we have a problem is the pandemic. And then prior to the pandemic was it was low unemployment. And prior to that it was those millennials. They just had a poor ethic. And then it was the immigrants. I mean, there was a million reasons why people thought that they couldn't hire the right people. 21 years ago was the same. Nothing's changed. People blamed women in the workplace. At that time, they blamed Gen X, and then it became the millennials. Now it's Gen Z. They blamed the education system. They blamed technology. They blamed taxes, government, globalization, you name it. And that's what the perfect labor storm was. And I was sitting many of you might recall, there was a movie, The Perfect Storm, a book, and then the movie. And I was sitting in the movie, and they were talking about this convergence of three innocent storms. There was like two storms off the East Coast and one coming from the West. And they were converging to create this once in a lifetime event. And I thought, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a perfect labor storm where we're converging demographics, technology, business, people, education, again, shifting demographics, ages, women in the workplace, ethnicity, changing jobs, accelerating pace of technology. And it stuck. And, I talked about it a while. And frankly, I sort of put it aside because people got tired of hearing about it. It was like, yeah, it's coming, but it hasn't come yet. And we were talking 2020. Never picked that 2020 would be like overnight it would happen. But literally, it was building. And then like that exponential curve that goes in the hockey stick. We had a perfect labor storm last year for many reasons. And it's going to continue. It's just going to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember going through grad school and talking about some of these issues that you just raised back. I did my grad school back starting in 2003. And so I'm sitting there and professors are talking about the impending, they didn't frame it as the perfect labor storm, but this labor shortage. And they listed all the same reasons that you were just listing. And they're talking about, the skills deficit and the labor gap moving into the future and all the baby boomers retiring and all these sorts of issues and how this is going to be such a huge challenge. And so I remember thinking about this a long time ago, and it's continually been on my mind. And it's actually been rather fascinating to me as I've seen others who don't seem to think it's that big of a deal or a big issue, from an organizational leadership standpoint, on the one hand, and politicians and others like that who just don't seem to pay much attention to it, other than to acknowledge that, every now and then they'll acknowledge that it's going to be a problem. But I remember, back 2005, thinking that this is going to be a big deal. The big recession in 2008 then changes people's perceptions on that, and everyone was thinking, oh, now it's just going to be delayed. Anyways, we fast forward to present time. In the middle of the pandemic, obviously, unemployment rates skyrocketed for a short period of time, in large part due to the pandemic. And so then people are thinking, maybe, because of the economic downturn, it's not going to be an issue anymore. But now we see things, coming back strong. And it just raises the issue once again that really, honestly, everyone should have been paying attention to for the last couple of decades. And it's, you just have all these different components, the demographic components that are feeding into it. You have the DE&I components that are feeding into it. You have globalization and virtual work and the disruptive technologies and the interconnectivity that's building into it. You have all these different components that ultimately are making it harder and harder and harder for organizations to get the good talent that they need in order for their organizations to be successful. And, I think people have been talking about this for a long time. And yet, I suppose it's like other big issues that, you just have to have people pounding the drum on it repeatedly over and over and over again. just to get people to pay attention. But now we're here. We see these dramatic shifts. The pandemic accelerated us into the future of work faster than anyone could have predicted that that we would have been here. And now we have to be able to deal with it. And organizations are scrambling, trying to figure out how they're going to, have the right people to fill the jobs that they need to be successful.
There's a couple of things going through my mind, and one of them is, as you said, it happens slowly then suddenly, and Ernest Hemingway in Sun Also Rises. Now, he was talking about bankruptcy, but he said bankruptcy happens slowly then suddenly, and it was like that's the future. That's what an exponential curve is. That's what changes. Is that we think that Steve Jobs or the next tech guy sits in his garage, launches a platform, and overnight it succeeds. And when you look at some of these fast rising stocks, especially from last year, they've been around for 10 years. We just didn't hear about them. They were just small technology, slowly growing. And then overnight, then suddenly an event happens and they are our savior. So that's pretty interesting. But I always think of Ernest Hemingway when I hear about the slowly, then suddenly, it happened. Interesting. And hopefully this will stick, that this was the shock. But the Deloitte, I'm going to screw up the name of the report if somebody wants to go look for it, but it was like the Deloitte Global Resilience Report. I think it was their inaugural report. And they surveyed quite a number of CXOs, and this is significant, 70% said that they do not have complete confidence in their organization and workforce to make the pivot that they need to make. 70%. So we're talking about, Deloitte's not calling up the Main Street, mom and pop shops. Pretty significant following. And that 70% of CXOs do not feel that they have the right people in place, that they have the organizational structure in place to pivot the next time. They're comfortable. They're satisfied that they got through the year, but everybody's waiting for the next shoe to drop. And so hopefully that's a wake-up call that people finally got the message that there is a perfect labor storm, or whatever you want to call it. And it's going to come. The other thing, I said this last year, that for some companies, recruitment, hiring people was going to be like trying to drain a swamp through a straw. That because there were so many people that were, one, unemployed, two is because they're looking for another job, they weren't treated properly, they didn't want to make that commute anymore, whatever reason, that there's going to be a flood of candidates, and companies just didn't have the technology, the processes in place to do that. That's another story. We can go down that tangent. The other part was that we already had a skill gap before the pandemic. The World Economic Forum identified that there's 375 million people worldwide at risk being left behind due to automation and the acceleration of change. Significant. There's about 100 million people that they identified in the U.S. that were at risk for being left behind. And then we have a pandemic. And, some of the organizations have increased those numbers by 25%. So while we will go back, the stock market's, at an all-time high, unemployment's falling. In the last few months, I'm in the hiring business. I don't staff and I don't recruit, but we provide pre-employment testing and we help companies create a better process for hiring. And throughout the year, we never slowed down. I was shocked. I've lived through 2008. I've been through 9/11, been through other crises, and it just never slowed, which showed to me that there was a significant part of the economy that was still growing and thriving. And, obviously distribution, logistics, and manufacturing, and a lot of those areas. And then the retail and hospitality, they certainly were impacted the most. But we still had 100 million people in place, and those companies were having trouble finding people. And people said, well, people don't want to work. It's the stimulus checks. It's PPP. And it was, no, it's not. I mean, part of it was, yes, they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to take the risk. But the other part was that the gaps that we've talked about for 20 some years, those gaps just widened substantially because all of a sudden people couldn't communicate with their work because they weren't comfortable with technology. There were, people all of a sudden, you were at work and they said, well, you can get that on your app. And they go, well, can you do that for me? Or I'll have to get my kids to do it for me. And all of a sudden they didn't have their kids around and they didn't have their IT departments around. And even very basic things like getting, my mother and my father-in-law didn't get their stimulus checks. And I go, well, we can go online and get them. Well, they can't go online. Oh, my mother actually is online, but she didn't know how to do it. My father-in-law is not online. They can't check. All of a sudden we became a touchless society. And I wonder now, I mean, you think about the gap of even going to work, if they have to sign in, if it's touchless, if you have to travel, it's touchless. You're going to go to a hotel. You're going to get. I just saw the other day for live events, like at Staples Center in California. It's opening up. It's completely touchless. If you don't own a smartphone, how are you going to get into an event? So I think that divide that between it's not people who are educated, because the majority of even 96% of people under the age of 30 own a smartphone in the US. So it's not a divide between the educated. It's going to be a greater divide because of digital literacy. Huge problem. And then, people are going to have to become much more adaptable.
I'm excited to announce the publication of my new book from HCI Press, The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership: Ordinary, Everyday Actions that Produce Extraordinary Results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. Yeah, I mean, those are really interesting points. The equity issues are in relation to the pandemic, and it's been highlighted many times over the past year in terms of health inequalities and socioeconomic inequalities in relation to the COVID impacts and the health outcomes for people. What you're raising, though, is another really important and interesting equity issue, and that is around the access to technology, the comfort level with technology, and the digital literacy around it, and how that's going to impact different populations as we move into the future. And that's just one piece of it, but there are all these different elements that are overlapping right now that ultimately have put us in this situation where, again, as you coin the term, the perfect labor storm, I think that's a really apt description. So what should employers expect in this coming year as they're trying to ramp up their hiring, given the current situation that we're in?
Pretty much what we've been talking about for years. It's going to be, for as difficult as it was in 2019 to hire talented people. It's going to be multiple times more difficult. It's not good news if you think that it's going to get better because people are going to be hungry looking for a job. Skilled labor is still incredibly difficult. They're also more demanding. I talk about a lot about the candidate experience, and prior to 2020, the candidate resentment rate, which is a strong word. So it's not that they're unhappy, they're disappointed. Resentment is a strong word. And what happens when people resent, they tell other people about what it was like. It had increased between 2016 and 2019. It had increased 40%. The resentment rate. At the same time that technology, that companies were investing literally billions of dollars to improve their recruitment processes. And one of the problems is the technologies were built for the employer. They were built to automate. We're just so busy. We're getting so many applications. How can we automate this? And while they turned to technology to help them, they worsened the candidate experience problem, which would have been fine and good if there's more people that have the talent for the jobs that have to be filled. But there aren't. And when there's a shortage of skilled labor, that skill gap has increased. Going back to what you said, even about the digital skills, how do you even find people if your audience doesn't have those skills? Or worse, strangely enough, is the companies don't have the technology, the digital literacy. The HR people, we're both work with HR. The HR people don't have the digital literacy skills that the candidates do. They want to communicate through text, through messaging, Snapchat, WhatsApp. They want video. They want communication. And to this day, it just blows me away. The most common mode of communication between HR and candidates is email. And emails are opened up 20% of the time. No, and then HR complains about ghosting.
Yeah. The digital transformation piece, I think, is really an important one to zoom in on. And to your point, there is a skills gap with certain segments of the population in terms of comfort level with these digital technologies and how they interface with organizations through the hiring process and every other way that an employee connects with an organization. But many organizations are way behind the curve in terms of digital transformation and adopting the usage of these technologies and doing it in a meaningful and streamlined kind of a way. And so you have it coming from both sides. Mm-hmm. And then to your point, you end up with a really crummy applicant experience or employee experience as they go through the process. And it's just aggravating to everybody. So we definitely need to figure out how to fix that. We need to be employee centric. We need to be customer centric. We need to be applicant centric. And another piece that really was interesting to me as you were explaining the labor shortage, especially around skilled types of positions, is one thing. If we haven't learned anything else from the pandemic, we've learned that geographical barriers in relation to work are artificial. Like we can connect with anyone anywhere. We can have a global workforce. We can have a virtual team, and it doesn't matter. We don't need to just hire people just from our metropolitan area, wherever we happen to be. But that opens up a whole nother, whole range of challenges and problems. So on the one hand, it's really nice that now we have this global labor force that is at our fingertips, so to speak, in terms of filling these skilled areas. Mm-hmm. But man, that's a really hard thing to do, and to do it well.
And something else that gets overlooked is that, companies and employees struggled with managers prior to the pandemic. It's been well known. Gallup's done a tremendous amount of studies, with it, that people don't leave companies, they leave their manager. So, and it really hasn't gotten a whole lot better. Pretty consistent since the early 2000s. Employee disengagement is high. Employee engagement is low. Only about a third of the population, a third of most workforces were engaged at work, which fell upon the managers to a degree to help do that. Now, on top of managers struggling to manage their teams, now we have remote teams. We have managers who aren't very comfortable with an on-site team. Now they have to manage a remote team. Even more troubling, they have to manage a hybrid team that some of their workers aren't there, some of them are. So imagine you're having this meeting. You're allowed to, you can work from home 3 days a week. Great. So 2 days a week, we'll plan all our meetings on those 2 days. Well, the hybrid workforce may not be that everybody is on site those 2 days every week. They may not work out for people. People are going to have new childcare, elder care, responsibilities at home. Maybe they don't want to commute. Maybe they got rid of one car. They don't want to commute 5 days a week. There's going to be a whole raft of new problems that people are just expecting that, well, yeah, that'll work. We'll plan all our meetings on Thursday. That doesn't solve the problem. So we're going to live in this area. You certainly know this. You talk about it all the time. We're going to live in this era of perpetual uncertainty for a while. VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But mostly that uncertainty for maybe forever.
Yeah.
And most people are very uncomfortable with that. And they haven't. And then it opens up a raft of issues. If, okay, we can have most of the team here on Thursdays, what are the technologies? How are we going to get everybody together to have a good conversation, a collaborative conversation? Does everybody have the technology to be able to do that? And how are we going to engage the people who aren't there on a regular basis? I mean, it's nice to be able to recruit people without a geographic limitation, but how do we then engage those people? How do we make them feel part of the culture? If managers and companies were so bad at before that they couldn't get more than 30% of the people engaged, what happens when they don't see them face to face? They're not even there. So it's going to keep us busy for a while. And top talent has choices. And we could say, when it's talking about top talent, this isn't like, the CEOs. I mean, we're talking, I can't tell you how many calls we get on a regular basis now from the trades, from construction companies, plumbers, electrician, welders. I mean, we had shortages before. Now it's even bigger. IT companies, healthcare. I mean, the same organizations that were struggling, just 2 years ago. Last year everybody sort of got a breather, but 2 years ago, it's heating up big time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Ira, it has been a real pleasure talking with you. The time has flown by. We're at the tail end of the episode today. But before we part ways, I did want to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, how they can find out more about your organization, your business, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks. So you can reach me at my website. Well, my company website is successperformancesolutions.com. You can also go to irawolfe.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter. You just type my name into Google. You'll probably find me, especially if you put Googleization next to it. It's there. I do have a community, Googleization Nation. It's free. You can join that. That's a really easy way to get updates of what's going on and with my podcast. And I do a lot of work. We're talking a lot about adaptability these days. We have a new adaptability quotient. It's fun. And actually it's done through a chatbot. It's not talking about new and innovative ways. You don't do it. It's not the standard assessment that here's a statement and do I agree or disagree with it. It's done through a chatbot. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to me and give me a call. The final word is I said it before, we are going to be living in an era of perpetual change, and uncertainty. And, we need to become comfortable with it and, look for ways that you can build the courage and gain confidence to be able to continue to move forward. Within chaos, there's always opportunity. And I'm extremely hopeful of where we're headed. And hopefully you'll connect and get some of the good vibes.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ira. I am also hopeful. I think there's a really tremendous array of opportunities that are before us if we can learn to sit within the discomfort and the ambiguity and the messiness and become more adaptable and resilient as we move into this uncertain future. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected with Ira, check out his business, check out his books, his podcasts, all the many amazing things that he's doing and all the great content that Ira is putting out. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.
We are excited about the launch of HCI's new magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine designed to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We will be publishing issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Check out the first issue and let us know what you think. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.